when you start thinking about the value of your time as a principal, or the value of your team's time, the equation is not, oh, I'm super rich and I'm flying my private jet. It's more of, this is a business tool that's allowing us to increase just-in-time capacity. Or you talk about getting to your next deal. You're in Orlando. We're not in a competitive market today, but let's say we are in a competitive market. The difference between you being in person today and you being in person tomorrow might mean that your competitor's there today, having shaken hands, eating lunch.
Interesting.
Sellers starting to, get to know them because you got stuck by American Airlines saying, oh, we're not flying today.
Preston, thanks for joining me today.
Dude, Chris, long time coming, man.
I know.
This is, I feel like we've been internet friends for like 5 years now.
You were one of my first internet friends, I think, when I got on Twitter.
Yeah. It's funny. People ask me like, why are you on Twitter all the time? I'm like, well, I've got all these friends there. And they're like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, I do meet them in person. I mean, I've hung out with Nick a couple of times, and Craig, met Craig on Twitter. And, there's ton of guys that, we know in common. Hunter Jones, who's up in Knoxville, we get together like once a quarter. And so it's, it's a lot of fun, fake internet friends. My wife makes fun of me a lot. And I'm like,
I have to tell my wife all the time, I'm like, it's like friends, but I promise you there's work embedded in this.
Right.
And I have proof. And on that note, you have proof that Twitter is actually like work. I think the best place, let me take one step back. You and I have been jamming on this idea for like a year. We met years ago, and I was actually going through our DMs. I think we started DMing each other in like 2019, 2020. But like a year ago, you're like, hey, we should do an episode that by the time the listener's done, they will have a full 101 of how the private aviation industry works. But I think before we get to that, I think it's just a cool story, like how you got into private aviation, because you didn't grow up like dreaming of being a pilot or loving aviation.
Yeah.
It kind of started with Twitter.
Yeah, it did. So before I started working with flying, I kind of I stumbled across this corner of Twitter of really intelligent people, and that were all kind of talking about business process and things they were trying. And, I was like, and I'm not like an internet guy. Like I was on MySpace, and like I've like grew up with the internet, but I'm not, my brother is like a big gamer and like all these virtual friends. That was never me. I was, going to go play with my friends in the neighborhood or something like that. And so I said, all right, well, I'm just going to start tweeting about what I'm thinking about. I was running a service business in East Tennessee. We're one of those service businesses that all of private equity is trying to go roll up because it was in Southeast Tennessee with, good weather 365 days a year and, good margins, and is a franchise business. And so was on a trajectory that I was totally happy with. I had no interest in kind of going anywhere else. I was, tapped to continue to grow the company. And so I started, talking about hiring and firing and managing, and how was I thinking about Google AdWords, and, what were we doing on marketing strategy and all that kind of stuff. And so I, didn't have a lot of followers. I had probably 900 followers for a really long time, but it was guys like you and guys like Nick before, you're kind of a celebrity now. I don't know if you know this about yourself, but
I don't.
It's not people on the street, but it's just about one step off of the street, and it's like, oh, do you know Chris Powers? Oh yeah, I love that guy. He's awesome. It's like I followed him when he had like 3,000 followers.
Never meet your heroes, trust me.
But so I started tweeting about it, and ended up. There's so many people that are kind of Twitter personalities that say like, oh, the beauty happens in the DMs. And I don't want to sound like a broken record, but truly there's a whole lot of interesting conversations that happen in Twitter DMs.
Yep.
And Craig Fuller, who we were both in Chattanooga, we had, it's like all of these friends that kind of overlapped, and, I knew what FreightWaves was doing, and, was kind of in the business ecosystem. And he sent me a DM and said, are you looking for a career move? And my dad taught me one thing really early on. He said the answer to that question is never no. It is always, let's have a conversation. And so get on a Zoom call. Craig was, it was during COVID. Craig was at home. He was kind of, his get on a Zoom call and he's like, "Hey man, I'm buying Flying magazine." And I looked at him, I was like, "Why are you buying a magazine, dude? Like, it's 2020 at this point. It's like, I can't tell you the last time I'd looked at a magazine." But my dad grew up he was a pilot. And so he flew blank checks or, bank checks from Atlanta all over the Southeast and the Midwest. And he grew up telling me stories about flying through, winter storms and getting stuck overnight and all this kind of stuff. And I'd always kind of dreamed about aviation and was a fan, but never really made sense. My parents were in real estate and I grew up during a time in which, 2008 was right about when I should have been starting to learn to fly.
Yeah.
And it was a tough time. And so I'd always wanted to learn how to fly. I always was interested in it. And so I said, "Craig, I know nothing about magazines. I know nothing about aviation, but I'll tell you this, pretty good at figuring stuff out. And it sounds like a lot of fun. So, count me in if you want to have me." And so
Wow.
I joined, I guess, day -30 of Flying Media Group at the time. And so we went, and I remember we announced at Oshkosh, and I walk around and I was the vice president of sales, which meant absolutely nothing at the moment. I mean, it literally meant absolutely. I didn't even have a business card. I had one of those like virtual tap cards that I'd made, and I'm walking up to these people like, "Hi, I'm Preston Holland. I'm with the group that just acquired Flying Magazine, and I'm the vice president of sales." And they're all like, "Who the hell are you?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "All right, well, we've got a tough hill to climb."
Yeah.
And so, we brought over some people from the team that had been with flying for a long time. I moved into an operations role pretty quickly. I like to tell people in those days, we were a 100-year-old startup. I mean, the brand started in 1927 with the, first flight across the Atlantic. And, it's like all this innovation that's happening during that time of aviation, but yet we were brand new. I mean, we'd existed for 45 days. We incorporated 45 days before we acquired the asset. And so set up all of our backend systems and all of that, kind of took over more of a senior leadership role. And then, here we are. I don't know. We went from, I think we had day one, we had 7 or 8 employees. We're at 200 and something today.
A Flying Media Group?
At Firecrown. So
at Firecrown.
Yeah, Firecrown, we're at 200 and something.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
And so you are now like an advisor, chief commercial officer, and now you're the CEO of another company y'all bought, which is...
Yeah. So we bought an aviation finance brokerage. And after we basically ran, it's private equity, but we weren't synergy hunting and kind of the traditional private equity stance.
Yeah.
We bought Flying, and then we kind of started looking around the industry. We said, look, there's all these little tiny publications that have really micro, like, okay, aviation's a niche.
Yeah.
There's niches within the niche. There is like kit planes, and there's light sport, and there's, business aviation, which is totally different, right? There's all these little little tiny pockets in aviation. So we basically started in saying, look, okay, we don't have a lot of good coverage in here, small mom and pop operator or a small publication inside of a larger organization. And once you buy 2 or 3, everybody's for sale. So, we started looking at everybody. I mean, everybody that wasn't already, that hadn't already had, called a private equity, event, we probably took a look at. And so our inbound, we went from outbound prospecting for deals to all of a sudden it's like flooding in, and, we're fielding. So I was running the company kind of day to day. Craig was the CEO. He was also still CEO of FreightWaves. Still is CEO of FreightWaves. Craig is a man of many talents and wears a lot of hats. But I was running day to day at Flying. I was also fielding a lot of inbound M&A requests. Craig would get the inbound. He'd have an initial call, and then all of a sudden it'd fall into my team, and we'd be operating a business, fielding inbound. So we ended up hiring a head of M&A, which was like my favorite day because I no longer had to handle the inbound. We had an M&A guy who would structure the deal, close, and then my team would take over and we'd integrate. And so when we acquired an aviation finance company, which is essentially what we do is we help people finance airplanes.
Yep.
And so it's a financial services business. The negative CAC concept, right?
Oh yeah, that's Craig's deal.
It's Craig's thing, right? I don't know if he coined the term but he might as well have. I mean, you know,
He beats that drum.
yeah, he does. And so, you know, we have an aviation real estate play, which we have a group that runs that. I've been involved, you know, kind of tangentially with that. And then when we acquired the finance business, Craig came to me and said, all right, we've got all the media companies. Now it's time to go run the commerce side. And he asked me if I wanted to go step into that role. And here I am. And it's a lot of fun.
Okay, let's spend a little more time here because you opened up some doors here. So M&A, so y'all bought the first flying magazine, and then you were looking for niches within the niche to add to the brand.
Yeah.
Media properties.
So to be fair,
yeah.
And Craig is a visionary through and through. I mean, and I truly, there have been very few situations where I've been in a room that I haven't, we've talked about this offline. It's like, he just makes you want to run through a wall.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, but he came to me and he said, look, this is gonna be a lifestyle business. This is kind of a side hustle. Like, I don't really want to
200 employees
go
later.
too crazy, which is like the biggest understatement of the, of the century.
Yeah.
And so basically brought flying, and then we kind of saw like, okay, there's opportunity here, and you can buy media businesses for multiples on media businesses are quite low.
Why?
Especially print. You know, you've got a lot of overhead.
Yeah.
So, you know, you're almost trading off contribution margin more than like true post SG&A like EBITDA.
Yeah.
Because you get to there's a certain scale inflection, and Craig's talked about this a couple of other places publicly, so I'm not spilling any secret sauce, but you hit a scale inflection point where as you add contribution margin, your fixed overhead cost doesn't go up, you know, exponentially. It goes up quite incrementally, but you have to get to a scale point to get there. So in the early days, I mean, it was everybody doing everything and burnout, and, you know, just, you know, it was funny. So we launched this. So Craig called me. My daughter was born 3 months later. We had our virtual event the day before she was born. I was answering emails in the labor delivery room, much to my wife's chagrin. And I think I took 3 days off, but she was born on a Friday. So I took Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I was back working Tuesday. And we launched a brand new website 14 days later after she was born. And that was my project. It was my project to own. It was, you know, that was, you know, fell in my lap. And so, you know, we didn't have a big tech development team. I mean, I had a team of outsourced, and I had never built a website. So I'm sitting here going, I don't like how that looks. I don't know how to fix it, but
Yeah.
I don't like how that looks. And so we launched that, you know, but as we started to build scale, we started to be able to have kind of specialized, you know, you kind of could have snipers as opposed to just like bulldozers, right?
Mm-hmm.
My nature and who I am as an operator and as a builder, I'm not a sniper. I'm a bulldozer, right? I'm going to go do it.
Yeah.
And we'll figure it out if it breaks. But when you hit a certain scale, you can't break things. I mean, you know, we tried to do a code update a couple of weeks ago, and we had to run it through a whole process and, you know, all that. I would have been like, hit go. If it breaks,
we'll fix it. Like,
but as you hit scale, you have kind of these operators that have capacity, right? So you think about like a print production team.
Yeah.
We had an outsourced print production team for the longest time. We now have a full team internally that handles all of that.
Yeah.
That cut our expense. We had an agency expense, basically kind of swapped one for one, and we were able to quadruple the workload into kind of that pod. So you have this scale inflection point that's really hard to get when you have one magazine.
Yeah.
But when you have 40 something,
you have 40 magazines now?
I don't know. We've got 28 aviation media brands. We have 10 marine brands, freight brand, 4 e-commerce brands, 3 two-sided marketplaces. Got a lot.
All that roll up into one.
All that roll up into Firecrown. Let's just say I'm glad I work on finance now. It's a lot.
Okay. All right. We could go here for a bit, and maybe we'll weave that back into the story. But you immerse yourself in the private aviation industry.
Yeah.
So let's begin a journey on this episode of trying to articulate to people the cost of private aviation, how the industry works. I'll pepper you with questions. Feel free to like fill in gaps of things that I don't ask. but let's give the guest something that when they, or the listener, when they leave, they're like, man, I know about the aviation industry now. So maybe the first to start is like, how does somebody know that maybe they should start thinking about flying private?
Yeah. So this is like the number one question that I get on Twitter and Twitter DMs. And to be clear, the whole reason that I started even writing a newsletter or anything was I kept getting the same exact question over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. So I said, okay, fine. I'm just going to write a newsletter. And then when somebody asks me, I'll just send them a link, be like, here you go, go read this, and then come back to me with questions. You know, it depends. It totally depends. So you have, so call it two buckets. So you have high net worth individuals, and this is a convenience factor, and this is you know, am either a really high earner W-2, or I have sold out of my operating business. So that is its own bucket, and that the threshold is much higher in that, because all of that expense is coming out post tax. You really don't have any tax advantages or any business expense advantages. So that's bucket number one. Bucket number two is the business owner or business operator, or the business entity that is using private aviation as a tool. So much lower threshold. Traditionally, what we'll see, somebody, who's chartering, you hit the net worth of, $1 or $2 million, you may take a private charter once a year or twice a year, if you're kind of an individual. But if you're a business entity that has kind of needs, call it in the geographic location. So this is great for, franchise businesses is big. So the guys who own a bunch of Taco Bells use private aviation more than most other people. Regional car dealerships is another big one. You're talking about service businesses. I know a guy who owns a bunch of ServPro franchises that are in really random parts of the Southeast that you can't fly to commercially. He'll fly something, kind of on the turboprop side. And we'll get into kind of what it looks like as far as which type of airplane that we buy. But, revenue businesses, lowest that we've kind of seen that regularly uses charter, call it $20 million in revenue.
Yeah.
And then up from there. Once you start talking about, needing depreciation, that's when you start buying, or you're flying for a certain amount of hours. But those are kind of the two buckets. I think for the purpose of this podcast, it probably makes more sense to focus on the business folks.
Yep.
Because ultimately you're going to do this so that you can ultimately be the high net worth that's chartering all the time. And you've likely already figured it out.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So, all right. My business is looking pretty good. Why or why wouldn't I charter?
So,
and what is chartering?
Yeah. Okay. So charter. So at its very core, think of chartering like an Uber. So you're going to get on your phone and you're going to push a button, and a person driving a car is going to come pick you up. They're going to leave from where they were. They're going to come to where you are, pick you up, and drop you off where you're going. And then they're going to the next, wherever they're going. That's the best way to frame charter. So you're paying for the Uber Black, the Suburban, you're paying for the driver, and you're paying for the gas and all of that in one transaction, right? So it's a one flat fee based off of mileage or time or whatever. That's chartering. You're going to pay, it is the most expensive way to fly private on a per hour basis. And to put a framework, is everything that we're going to measure over this next conversation, I'm going to use in the word hours. So the speed of the airplane affects how many hours it takes you to get somewhere. So that's a lever. If you fly Citation X amount of miles, it's going to go faster than if you fly a King Air. Yep. So 1 hour may be a whole lot more legs in a Citation X, just as an example. But when you measure costs and you measure, maintenance intervals and everything, most everything's measured in the hour, call it hours.
Okay.
So you're going to pay the most per hour, but charter is the least committal way to fly private. If you and I wanted to go up to Meacham right now and we wanted to go to Vail, and we called a charter broker and we said, hey, we're going from Meacham to Vail. We're going to leave in 12 to 24 hours. You need to give them a little heads up. So you got to move an airplane to you. It'll be there. We get off in Vail. That's it. You're done.
Okay.
All the rest of the ways, you're kind of committing, you're making a level of commitment. So charter is the least committal way to fly private. It's also the most expensive, and you're going to pay 7.5% federal excise tax on top of that.
And I know we're going to get deep into it, but if you had to say, like, generally speaking, it's 2 times more per hour, all plane equivalent, or 3 times per hour?
I would say, yeah. I mean, so ownership is the least just on a raw per hour basis.
Mm-hmm.
Owning the airplane is, let's call that one. Fractional, you're going to pay, call it 1.5 to 1.7, kind of depending on the operator. And then charter is going to be 2-ish, right? So if an airplane costs $3,000 an hour to fly, the hard cost, you're probably going to pay $6,000 to $7,000 an hour.
Okay. But you said charter customers have been feeling pain on their current rates.
They have.
At the same time, we had the rapid increase in demand. We have also had a pilot shortage. When operators can only operate at 80% capacity of the metal because the humans up front need to sleep, there's even more pressure to put on the system.
Yep.
So explain a little bit more about what's going on in the charter market.
Yeah. So charter has experienced, there's been an insane amount of demand that's come into the private aviation space since about halfway through 2020, right? So there, if you follow any of the charts, one of my favorite charts that I follow is a data company called WingX. They put out a bulletin. They actually put out the bulletin while I was on my way over here to the studio. But you watch this absolute cliff drop off like March of 2020. No one's moving, right? You see it in most every chart that you look at, right?
Yeah.
You see this cliff and it's like, no one's flying, no one's doing anything, no one knows what's going on. Well, about halfway through 2020, everybody figured out, I think it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And everybody's a little bit more confident. But what you have is there's an echelon of people that never flew private, but now they're like, well, I don't want to get COVID, but I do want to go on vacation, or I do want to go to wherever, right? I want to go do a business trip, but I'm very conscious of how many people I'm interacting with on the way. Said, well, I'm going to fly private. And we had so much free money floating around in the system that it's like, well, whatever, right? So you had kind of supply and demand had equalized, 2017, 18, 19, 20 drops off. And then all of a sudden it's like someone turned the fire hose on and everybody's flying private. And so operators are charging whatever they want to for, you're seeing 40, 50% premiums. I mean, one of the interesting parts is that I get to be kind of the curator of people's stories anonymously who fly private. So there's a couple of accounts that are out there that you and I both know on a first name basis that will send me direct messages. They're never going to tweet publicly that they fly private, but they've said, look, my charter rate has gone up 40% since 2019, 60%. On a Phenom 300, they were used to paying $6,500 an hour. And now it's like, can't get anything for less than 11. So it's like, you had all of this. Basically, everybody's throwing up numbers, whatever will take, right? Law of supply and demand. It's quite a simple concept, right? There is a finite amount of airplanes that can fly in charter, and the manufacturers can only create so many more.
Yep.
But then there's all this demand. Price is going to go up, and price did go up. And I think we're like literally in the last 90 days, we're finally seeing charter to maybe show signs of chilling out a little bit. There's a couple of things that you can look for if you're chartering pretty regularly that indicate that we might be getting prices that are a little bit more reasonable. But it was so inflated for so long because you had all these new entrants into the market. You have guys that flew first class, or guys from Comfort Plus went to Wheels Up, and guys from first class went to NetJets and kind of upper echelon charters. But really, people were taking whatever capacity was available. At the same time, we have a macro problem in the pilot industry. So you have aging out pilots. You have kind of all of the GI Bill pilots have all aged out. And then you kind of have that next wave, kind of call it the baby boomer pilots, which is a huge generation. Well, they're all hitting. You don't want your guy up front being 90 years old. I mean,
yeah.
If your pilot is 90 years old, I would suggest not getting on the airplane. I mean, it's a cognitive thing. It's no, that's not ageism. That's just,
we'll let him run the country, but we won't let him fly our planes.
Exactly. Two of them. I mean, we got two of them going against each other, and we'll see who stumbles off the stage first. But I tell you what, neither of them, when they fly on their planes, neither of their guys up front are 90, right? And so you have kind of the baby boomer generation that's aging out, and there's just not enough people to backfill it. And so you've seen this in airlines, but it's the same way in private aviation. You've still got a problem. Now, one of the advantages private aviation has is there's a brick wall at the airlines. When you turn 64, that's it. You're done.
Yep.
Private aviation, you can stretch it to 67, 68, but at a certain point they want to retire. And so you have this pilot shortage. So you've got, that's one. And then the other piece is if I was typed in a Honda jet, if I was qualified and certified to fly a Honda jet, and you own a Gulfstream and you call me and say, can you come fly my Gulfstream? The answer is no, I can't come fly it. So you have like finite amount of people who can fly these airplanes, and they've been flying, the wheels off these airplanes. They don't have enough pilots to fill that demand, because sure, the airplane, the metal may be able to move more, may be able to stretch it to 650 hours a year, but you don't have 4 pilots on staff. You've got 2 pilots on staff.
Yeah.
2 pilots can realistically fly 400 hours a year. So you kind of have all these like little macro forces that are all kind of pushing at each other, which drove the price of charter through the roof.
So the lack of pilots, were you seeing a lot of people that own jets that previously weren't chartering them out, enter them into or put them into charter fleets?
Yeah, because I mean, you've got charter operators running around the airport going, hey, does your airplane meet 135 conformity standards? Put it on my charter and you're going to make all this money, right? And one of my more popular newsletter is you can't house hack a jet. I don't know, the bigger pockets guys talk about house hacking, right? And
yeah.
I'm going to buy a duplex. I'm going to live in half, going to get the other guy to pay my rent, and then I'm going to live for free.
You're answering my next question. Go with it.
Yeah. So you can't house the math doesn't math.
Okay.
You cannot, there is not enough margin in the trip, and you can't fly it enough hours to cash flow positive and fly for free. It's just like, even if you were promised that during 2020 through 2023, which a lot of guys were, oh, you'll be able to fly 50, 75 hours a year for free. But then you got a $500,000 hot section or a, engine replacement coming up. That ain't free. Yeah. And you don't have $500,000 sitting in the bank because of all the margin you've been making on your charter legs, right? So it's like, you can offset your cost, and yes, you can put your airplane on charter, and now your hangar and insurance and your database and your pilot cost and a lot of that stuff, you can reduce that fixed cost. I was having a conversation today at lunch with a guy, and he was like, well, I don't really see that as fixed cost. I'm like, well, it's fixed cost in the way it doesn't matter if you fly 400 hours a year or 20 hours a year, you're going to pay insurance. Insurance is flat. Insurance is not a variable. You don't pay per hour for insurance. You don't pay per hour for the hangar rent, for your office rent, for your log books, for your pilot recurrent training. All that fixed cost is what it is every year. You can charter and make, let's say you charter out for, we'll use like super round numbers. These are not real numbers, but for the sake of mental math, for those that I like to listen to your podcast driving in the car, and so I couldn't get my calculator out, right? So you charter for $10,000 an hour. Okay. So it's $10,000 an hour to the client. So we're going to get Johnny on a jet.
Okay.
He's going to pay $10,000 an hour. Okay. The charter broker takes a portion. It's a 5 to 7% mark, call it. So they're going to get paid. Then you have the management company. Management company contracts range between a 20%, 25 is probably the steepest, 25% rev share to a 10% rev share. So the management company that takes care of your airplane and cleans it and makes sure that, all of your logistics are taken care of, they're going to take a rev share. So that, call it 70% of the $10,000. So you're getting $7,000 an hour. It costs $5,000 an hour to fly that airplane. So you're only making $2,000 an hour. The top line number is 10. You're only making 2. You have to fly a lot of hours to cover your, $300,000 insurance and hangar bill. Oh yeah, you got to pay your pilots. It's going to cost you $150,000, $170,000, $220,000 a year, plus benefits, plus their insurance. So there's all these like fixed costs. So if you're making $2,000 an hour, you got to fly that thing hundreds of hours on charter just to cover your fixed costs. That's before you ever step on the airplane, the owner. So it's like, there's a lot of TikTok guys that get out there. There's one in particular, and I talked in another podcast about this, that like, he talks about well, let me show you how I fly my jet for free because I rent it out to P. Diddy and whoever else when I'm not using it. But actually, he sells a mastermind course that is $30,000 a year, which includes a ride on his jet with him. I'm betting that probably goes into it.
This is Meet Kevin. Is this Meet Kevin?
I respect the hustle.
Correct.
I'm not dissing what he's doing. I'm saying for you to publicly say you can fly for free, like you're doing funny math.
Yeah.
And it's misleading for the guys it's misleading for the real estate developer who's not selling a course.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a platform to sell a course or to rent a P. Diddy. P. Diddy's not flying on a CJ4.
P. Diddy ain't flying anything anymore.
Right. Or not P. Diddy. Sorry. I was thinking of
that account is been closed.
Shoot. We should probably edit out the P. Diddy part.
No, I think we should leave it in.
Leave a P. Diddy. That's a good point. I was thinking like Rick Ross or like, I don't know, some big rapper, right?
Yeah.
Or he was like, LeBron rents my plane. I'm like, cool. LeBron's 7X and larger, right? Like not everybody's flying around in Gulfstream G650s.
Okay, but generally speaking, let's just say the average person that owns a plane that they're putting in a charter, it's probably getting flown a couple hundred hours a year in that charter. It's maybe reducing their expense base 20% a year.
Best case scenario, you're going to cover your fixed cost. So like,
okay.
So there are certain models that I coined this term that I probably won't catch on, but it's kind of the charter cost spread, right?
Yeah.
So the Citation XLS is a great example.
Okay.
Very efficient to fly, but it's a mid-sized cabin that from here in Dallas, we're touching all four corners of the country. So it's in high demand in a lot of places.
Yeah.
And so the market rate is higher than the spread between the market rate for the charter and the cost basis to fly it is higher than say like a G450, which is not as favorable, right? Or a Citation X, a Citation 10. A Citation 10 is not as favorable in that spread than an XLS. So like there are certain little niche markets that like you may be able to make a few bucks, right? The Lear 45 is another example of that where like you can charge enough in the market and the cost operates a little bit lower. And so you can make a few more bucks. But the best case scenario is you offset all of your fixed costs. So I'm now not responsible for insurance. I'm now not responsible for the hangar. I'm not responsible for paying for the pilots. All of that is covered by your charter margin. And then when you step on the airplane, you're paying for fuel and direct operating costs only. That's best case scenario.
Okay. Then you just led me to the next question. We don't have to go into each one, although I might just ask you like how much it would. I know there's lots of planes, so I might not go there yet. What falls in your fixed cost category?
Yep. So insurance, hangar, management. So that is, you're going to pay $10,000 a month to a company so AirShare, for instance, I don't know what the AirShare management fee is, but let's say it's $10,000 a month. You pay them that, and that keeps them, keeping your logbooks up and making sure your pilots are scheduled correctly. And they do kind of your in-house corporate flight department. It's kind of outsourced. So,
but that's if you're chartering. If you just own it directly, that's not part of your fixed cost.
Not necessarily. There's a couple of folks that I know that they pay a management company to handle it because they don't want to, like, there's a lot of nuance to like upkeeping your airplane, and you're probably going to have to pay your best case scenario, you have a chief pilot who you overpay comparative to what you just pay a normal pilot.
Yeah.
And your chief pilot acts as kind of your in-house flight department. But like with the management company, you get fuel discounts. So like you're going to get $1 off fuel wherever because you use the management's, basically volume buying power.
Yep.
So anyway, so you've got you got salaries, and that's a pass through. So your $10,000 a month you pay to the management is not including your pilot salaries.
Okay, and relatively speaking, how much more do you pay a chief pilot than another pilot? Assuming there's two.
I don't know, probably 30% more.
Okay, and then you said the word database.
Yeah, so like,
what's a database?
You got there's a ton of softwares. So like, you've got like avionics databases that you've got like subscriptions to. So like, I don't know, like let's say they moved a sign at Teterboro. Like Teterboro sign that was Alpha 1 is now Alpha 1 square, Alpha 2, or whatever. That like has to get updated in all of your airplanes. Like that basically plug a thumb drive in and it updates everything. So like you got that, you've got maintenance tracking. So there's softwares that basically you plug your tail number into and it makes sure it's like, hey, by the way, like 10 hours, you're going to need this maintenance event, or, you need to go check your oil levels or whatever. Right. So those are all kind of computer databases. They're a couple $100 a month. I mean, it's not, you're not talking about anything crazy, but like okay, I'll give you an example. I don't know. Name your favorite business jet.
A Challenger 350.
Challenger 350. Beautiful airplane. Good choice. So these are all like estimates, rough numbers. So I use a service called Conklin and DeDecker. It's a subscription service. We've got a partnership with them, and it's what I use all of my data on. So if you read numbers in my newsletter, 95% of the time it comes from this database. Pretty up to date, and they, update it like twice a day. Captain salary 217, co-pilot 158. You don't need a flight attendant on a 350, so I'm going to skip the flight attendant. But like, let's say add 30% for benefits, right? I usually do the 1.35 times calculation. 75,000 in insurance.
And real quick, insurance is covering like plane crash,
hull, yeah, not even crash. Yes, that's worst case scenario, but it's also covering like there's a thing called hangar rash. Okay, so I don't know if you've ever seen this. There's an incident here in the DFW area where someone had a Global 6500 and they didn't have wing walkers, or they had wing walkers, but the wing walker looked away and they pulled the wing through somebody else's airplane. Both are on the ground.
Got it.
These are like $60 million airplanes. Like that's not a cheap whoops.
Yeah. Okay.
The hangar insurance covers some of that, but there's still got to be more. Or you're out there and you hit a bird, or like you're out there and I don't know, your pilot lands a little too hard or something like that. It's that kind of stuff where it covers the stuff on the outside. And then there's some liability for the inside. What a lot of our kind of high net worth clients will do is they have to up their E&O insurance and, all that kind of stuff. It's like there's a big insurance play, and depending on how old the airplane is. But just talking about the airplane insurance, $75,000 a year. And then, if you wanted to say like, hey, every couple of years, I'm going to want to redo the interior, right? You'd say like, I'm going to budget, I don't know, $100,000 a year for in 5 or 6 years, I'm going to do a full interior upgrade or new paint or whatever. So, call that, navigational charts, $14,000 a year. Computer programs, $10,000 a year. It's expensive. That's not even Wi-Fi. Like,
what's Wi-Fi cost?
I just heard a story of a guy who they've got a G550. This is an extreme example, but their G550 costs $30,000 every time they cross the pond in their own airplane.
Just for Wi-Fi?
Just for Wi-Fi. To get Starlink, it's like $200,000 or $300,000 to install it. That is not per month. It's like $10,000 a month.
So when all these JSX planes, I know that's a charter service, whatever
they get a little volume discount,
but they all have, yeah. Wow. I would say this: the Wi-Fi on a JSX flight is like better than
my house.
How much does it cost? Like, we'll stay on the chart. We'll talk through multiple planes throughout the episode, but on this one, what would it cost to paint a Challenger 350?
Actually, we're gonna need.
Is it like painting a house or?
No, it's a lot more.
I figured you would say that.
I've actually got a quote because I got a client who's got his 300, which is the same airplane, in at Duncan right now. No, he's doing interior. Interior is like $500,000 to do like leather and carpet and like some hard surfaces, but not much. I don't know, a couple $100,000. I mean, like $300,000-$400,000, depending on like how elaborate you're gonna get. So,
is there anything else in fixed costs?
No, that's your fixed cost. So it's primarily salary, insurance, and hangar, and then management company if you want.
And then the cost of hangar is really market dependent. If you're out in Nowheresville, Alabama, it's going to be cheap. If you're right outside of New York City or Miami, it's probably going to be expensive.
Well, it also depends on how big your airplane is. So like you're paying by the square foot, right? So if you can only fit, like if you could fit 3 Challenger 300s, you could fit 5 TBMs.
My as a real estate guy, I'm starting to see a lot of these funds that are either buying hangars or building hangars.
Yeah, it's big right now.
And one of the things that I was really surprised by, they had this slide that I just wouldn't have thought was basically, the building's the building, but the planes are getting bigger, wingtip to wingtip.
Yep.
And so part of like the bull case is the wingspans will keep getting longer and you'll just be able to fit less planes in these things. So rent will go up and the availability goes down. I was like, oh man, I just never would have thought of that.
I talked to a client a couple weeks ago that he was like, well, I've got an order on I've got a contract on a Global 6000. Called my hangar and realized I'm like 8 feet too long.
Yeah.
He's like, so now I got to go either build or find a new hangar. And it's like, those are the kinds of things where it's like, there's just so much nuance to it where it's like, you think about like, okay, light jet versus medium jet. I mean, you can, one of the things that I love to do is even at like DFW or a big airport is like seeing the difference in size between a 737 and a 777. Like you think like, oh, it's kind of bigger. No, it's like astronomically larger.
Yeah.
Same with business jets. The difference between a Gulfstream G650 and a Challenger 300, the Challenger 300 is going to look like a toy.
Yeah.
So much smaller. So it's like, there's all these like, kind of nuancy things with how big of an airplane are you buying? And then, okay, there's 4 typed pilots in the Premier 1A in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I just learned this at lunch. 4. 2 of them are at a corporate flight department that they won't share. And then the other 2 have to support, there's 7 or 8 in the area. So people are flying their pilots in from Las Vegas and North Carolina and Oklahoma because you have to have type pilots. So like my point being that like, if you like narrow in on like a model, you really need to build a team around you. We're on the finance side. So like, you want to buy it, we'll help you get money. We help you find debt, but there is so many other variables that happen. And if you're doing this by yourself and you think that you can back of the napkin it, like you can make $500,000 mistakes pretty simple, like pretty easily.
Real quick, what are direct costs? We talked about fixed. What goes into direct?
So direct costs, you've got fuel and additives, right? So additives like, fuel additives or oil or that kind of stuff, right? So fuel, so on the feet, or we're talking about the Challenger 350, 1,800 an hour in fuel. It's assuming a market average of about 625 for Jet A. It's what it has been actually for a while. Maintenance reserves. So on airplanes, you actually put away money essentially, but you buy an insurance product. It's called engine programs. You have engine programs, you have parts programs, you have avionics programs, APUs, auxiliary power unit programs, where for every hour that you fly, you're going to bank a certain amount of money because at the end of the life, you're going to be hit with a $500,000 bill. And unless you're super liquid and can kind of self-insure, it's always better to be on programs. And if you want to finance, the bank's going to want it on programs. They don't want to get back a bucket of bolts. There's a lot of reasons your resale value gets maintained if you're on programs. So as you depreciate the airplane, if it's on programs, it depreciates less hard than those that are not on programs because the next buyer may want to be on programs. So maintenance reserves, for instance, on this one is $1,300 an hour. And then, engine reserves, $956. And then miscellaneous is like crew expenses, which is like, I'm going to fly to Teterboro. I'm going to stay for a week. I got to fly my pilots home for the week and then back, or lodging or meals or whatever. Right. Oh. So add another $663 in. So $47.96 an hour to fly a Challenger 350.
On the program thing, is the program with, who's the program with? The bank?
There's a couple providers. It's a third party. It operates like an insurance product. Yeah. More than like a financing product.
Got it.
So you're banking.
If you're getting a loan, they're requiring you to get one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like 90, if you're over 50% loan to value,
yeah,
you've got to be on age.
But if you pay all cash, I guess you don't have to, but you probably would.
But what you're going to do is you're going to pay all cash. And then every hour that you fly, like you've got your depreciation curve is going to go way steeper. So like you go to resell the airplane, the average life of an airplane is like 3 years. It's a trade up market. It's like most clients that we deal with, that all my broker buddies are like, In about 36 months to 48 months, I'm usually getting a phone call saying, hey, I'm starting to think about, what I want next, bigger, faster, stronger. I saw my buddies.
Imagine that.
I saw my buddies got, here's the craziest my buddies got story. I heard this. I've got a friend. He lives in California and he's got a client who was at the country club, and his friend was sitting next to him at the bar. And he said, I've got a Global 6500. And he had at the time like a Legacy 500, great mid-sized airplane. And he went out and he bought a 6500. He flies it 40 or 50 hours a year. That is like a $45 million airplane that like could take him from California to Europe nonstop, and he could sleep in the back and shower. My friend, he was like, yeah, we went from California to Oregon, and he was like, this is the longest trip I've taken in like 6 months.
Yeah.
It's just nuts. America's awesome though. Like that is literally like your big American exceptionalism. Like where else in the world can you do that?
Yeah.
Nowhere else.
Let's talk about dry leases. So
this is a popular in your Twitter comment. This was a very popular.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't know why,
leases.
but you also said that your favorite aviation company on the planet is called the non-135 Aircraft Dry Lease Company.
Yeah.
So what are dry leases, and why is that your favorite company?
Okay, so to understand what dry leases are, we have to understand the two rules of flying a business jet. So you have Part 135, which is on-demand charter. There's a giant list of rules. It's FAR 135, which is like a big regulation book, basically, that says these are all the things that you can do. But in essence, they've got some restrictions on pilot duty time. For instance, you can't, if you're flying 135, if we're leaving here from Dallas and we're going back to Chattanooga, and Chattanooga was fogged in right now, and below minimums, you couldn't fly in when you take off. You can't take off.
Okay.
Part 91 is the best way to think of it is in a Part 135, you're calling an Uber. In Part 91, it's more like renting a car.
Okay.
So, or if you own the car, right? So I'm going to operate the car how I want to operate the car. I'm going to fly how I want to fly. I'm going to go where I want to go. There's a lot less rules and regulations on Part 91. Under 135, you're paying federal excise tax. It's very scrutinized. The airplane is held to a really, really high maintenance standard. There's a certain amount of checks. Your pilots have to get trained every 6 months instead of every 12 months if you're flying Part 91, for instance, right? In most airframes. Part 91 is you kind of fly it as if you own it or you're renting it. So a dry lease is like renting a car from your friend or from somebody else. So and that's literally how the FAA explains it is 135 is like calling a cab or an Uber, and Part 9 and a dry lease is and under 135 you're wet leasing. A common misconception is that wet lease means with gas. That's not actually true. They both come with gas. But a wet lease includes crew, and as a part of the crew salary, you're paying for the entire trip. Under Part 91, you pay the crew separately, and then you rent the airplane. So I'm going to, like, let's say Turo is a great example, right? Like, let me rent your car that you own. I'm going to have a dry lease in that situation to operate your car how I want to. I may hire a driver. That's totally fine, totally acceptable. But I'm going to fly the airplane how I want to. So dry leases, that's exactly how dry leases work in aviation. And there's a company in Austin called Lift Aviation. And I wrote about it in my newsletter about how it's a really interesting concept that I think, and they're doing it the right way, which is the important part, because there's a lot of really shady dry lease pools that happen. There's, all up and down the Midwest. I know of a couple that it's like, they probably are breaking some rules according to the FAA. But this one is doing it right, where they're essentially what they're doing is they're brokering dry leases between end consumers and the airplane owners. So we have a friend from Twitter who owns an airplane at Lyft. And so he basically said, hey, this is a cool company. Let me tell you how it works. And so I wrote it up and it worked. There's a lot of people in Austin that are flying at Lyft after they read that newsletter, which is pretty cool.
If you're listening to this, fly at Lyft. All right.
And tell him Preston sent you.
And tell him Preston sent you for 0% off.
I do not get a kicker on that.
Yeah.
I'm super transparent. If I'm ever making money on a transaction in my newsletter, I am like, I will make money here, or, hey, I have nothing to gain here. Just tell him I sent you because it'd be funny.
Jet card memberships.
Yeah.
Well, actually, really quick, let me just ask you one more thing about charter. If you own a plane, but you put it in the charter fleet. So there's charter companies that own their own planes and they charter them
Wheels
out.
Up or Fly Exclusive
Correct.
or whoever.
But let's say I owned a plane and I said, I just want to charter it out 300 hours a year.
Yep.
One thing I'm giving up is that on-demand ability to get on my plane whenever I want, because who has the priority to use it in most cases?
Whoever booked it first.
Okay. That's what I thought.
So like, let's say you said, okay, I know for spring break and I know for annual meeting, I'm going to the Berkshire meeting and I'm going to go to Capital Camp and I'm going to, all these events that we all love to go to, SMB Bash, and going to go see Moses out in California. You put that on the schedule as soon as you know about it, right? So they're not going to schedule, like, you get to take priority as the owner. A good management company will obviously prioritize you as the owner. You're the guy who owns the airplane. But if, let's say you and I decided that we wanted sushi, right? We want to go eat San Diego sushi. My mom went to SMU and had that story. She was on a date and the guy was like, I want sushi. So they got on the oil jet, and flew to California. It's nuts. But let's say that we were, privileged enough to where that's what we wanted to do. Well, guess what? It's out making money.
Yeah.
Tough luck.
Yep.
Right. So that's the part that you give up. You give up a little bit of that spontaneity. There's a chance it might be sitting there. You just don't know.
That poor kid didn't get to go get sushi in San Diego. Golly. I mean, my heart bleeds for him.
I know. That was before the oil crash too. It
was just a double 80s. Whammy. Can't get sushi and oil crash.
And now he's poor.
We'll have to wait 2 more years. It'll come back. All right. Jet card memberships.
Yep.
You don't have to spend a long time here. I think they're pretty self-explanatory.
What you're buying is you're buying a convenience. So
you're basically buying a gift certificate.
Yeah. So what you're doing is, you're a Magellan card, right? A Magellan card with another friend in private aviation that we know that has a Magellan card. You're not really they tell you you're going to get a discount. You're really paying open market rates. You might save 5%. You might pay 5% over. You're not really saving a lot of money, but what you're doing is you're buying kind of a convenience factor. So you put money on deposit. So, and anybody can start a jet card. There's like so many places where this industry is so regulated, and other parts of the industry where it's like, do whatever you want to, right? So you and I wanted to go start, CP, Chris and Preston jet card service, right? Okay. So we go and we call all of our wealthy friends and we say, hey, we're gonna start this card. You're gonna get all these perks. You're gonna get whatever. Send us a $300,000 wire, and then you'll burn it down over time, right? So they send in the $300,000 wire, and then they take 10 trips that cost $30,000 each, and now their account is empty. The risk that you're taking on when you buy a jet card is you better know who the operator is, and you better have confidence that they have staying power. Because at the end of the day, you have on the balance sheet, you are way in the back in receivership. Like if they go bankrupt, like if Wheels Up was to go bankrupt, they didn't. Delta came in and saved them. If they were to go bankrupt, there are so many people in front of you, the people who had $500,000 in deposit with Wheels Up, there's so many people in front of you in that receivership. You will probably never see it, but if you do, it'll be in 5 or 6 years and you might get half of it.
So that's a risk.
It's a risk.
That you put all this money up front,
right,
and the company goes under.
Right. Now, there are some that will offer to put in an escrow service. They may charge you $1,000. I think it's worth it. I mean, I would rather preserve, company is bankrupt. Well, cool. My deposit's sitting in escrow. But if it's not, if you just have it in if it's in their bank account, and there's a lot of, the private aviation has a littered past with companies that will use customer deposits to then go and try and fuel business growth. And that is literally, you look at any big company that's ever failed in private aviation, that's exactly what they did. And that's why NetJets is totally different. They don't do those kinds of business practices. That's why it's a great business.
Yeah.
But it's those guys who it's like, oh, I've got $10 million in cash in the balance sheet in the asset side, but they were like, oh yeah, that deferred liabilities line, just don't look at that. Or I'm going to go use that cash that I now have, go either buy an airplane or fuel growth or whatever, well, eventually there's a chance that runs out. So you want to have like somebody with staying power and somebody that's going to be around a long time. If you're going to buy one of those prepaid memberships, that's my big warning. And anytime I talk to somebody, there is something to be said that I have my guy at Magellan that I pick up the phone, or I have my guy at Sentient, or I have my guy at Wheels Up, or whoever that I pick up the phone and the airplane's going to be there tomorrow. Something to be said about that. And maybe you might realize some discounts, or maybe they'll save you on an empty leg. But at the end of the day, it costs what it costs. Like, you're probably not going to save money, and you've got some cash out there at risk.
Is there a website or anything where people can go on and look for empty legs that are happening?
Yeah. So the empty leg, I like geek out over my headlines, like, or my subject lines. And one of them that I wrote was about empty legs. Empty legs, kind of like Bigfoot. There's a lot of people that have claimed to have seen him, but you've probably never seen him.
Yeah.
And there's websites out there, like Wheels Up has their own kind of syndicated empty leg platform.
Yep.
Volato has one called Vaunt. Kind of the bigger operators will have them. About 40% of advertised empty legs are just charter brokers trying to get you to bite on a full price leg.
Yeah.
So it's like,
they're not really empty.
Yeah. Like I saw one on LinkedIn that was like Orlando to like Miami on a CJ4 for like 18 grand. I'm like, that's just full price. Like that's not a deal. Right. So like, and the problem is that like the reason why you fly private is so that you can go when you want to. And when you get on an empty leg, like you're kind of at the luxury of somebody else.
For
so
sure.
Like it's the stars have to align for you to get onto an empty leg. And then hopefully you get somewhere close with regional air service, because you're probably not catching one backwards.
Probably hard to start, but it seems like if you create a marketplace where you just like booking an American Airlines flight, you just got on and looked for empty legs.
Yeah.
That were actually empty and discounted.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a two-sided marketplace that a lot of brokers use and operators called Avinode. It's a really interesting software. I think if anybody's got a chance of figuring it out, it's them. They just had a big giant exit. So I don't know. I don't know. You'll see what the future is on that.
Okay. Fractional.
Yeah. I love Fractional. I think it makes sense for like, if there's like, so charter makes sense for most anybody, and people who own airplanes or have fractional is still charter. Like,
right.
Supplemental lift is what it's called. So, on fractional, you're buying a portion of the airplane. Okay. So up to 1/16th is kind of the regulation. I think you can technically sell like a 32nd, or like two guys can buy a fractional together. There's a whole LLC structure, not tax or legal advice, but like you can, figure some of that stuff out. But you're buying a portion of the airplane up front. And then you're paying per hour, usually 20 to 40% over cost. So like, it's not as cheap as if you own the whole airplane, but it's not as expensive as if you chartered. And there's tax benefits to a fractional because you actually own part of the asset. So if you have a NetJets fractional, there is an airplane out there somewhere that you own. You probably have never gotten on it, but you own one of them out there, right?
Yeah.
Somewhere in the NetJets fleet is my airplane, and you know what your tail number is, but it's out there somewhere. And so you actually own the part of the airplane, where it's different than a jet card. If the operator goes under, you still own that part of the asset. So like you actually end up being a 1/6 owner with 5 other strangers, but you're still kind of secured on that.
Yep. And you would do that because you get depreciation if it's business.
Yep.
On buying that fraction, and you probably are paying some type of annual or monthly operating costs that's fixed.
Yep.
And then your probably hourly rate is less.
Yep, exactly. So like your blended hourly rate. So I talked about this as like, what is my actual all-in cost to fly it? Because if you take your fixed cost, like let's say you're flying 75 hours a year, take all your fixed costs divided by 75 plus your actual direct hourly cost, that's your real cost. And different programs are structured different ways, and they're really structured in a way that fits their target market. So I'll use an example. So you have NetJets and you have AirShare, and they compete in 2 classes of airplanes, the Challenger 3500 and in the Phenom 300. So they both have both of those on their fleets, and you can buy a fraction on both of them. Pricing is comparable. I mean, they're close. I mean, this is a market, right? You can't charge 40% above market and expect everybody to come to you. So it's all relatively the same. You may pay a little bit higher fixed cost, a little bit lower hourly cost, but I had a subscriber get quotes from NetJets and FlexJet on a Phenom 300, and I think the difference, like all in hourly, was like $83.
Yeah.
So it's like it's all kind of the same. So AirShare does a days based model, whereas NetJets is straight hourly model. So on AirShare, you've got the plane for the day, fly it for as much as you can during the day. Great for road shows, like fundraising. People who fundraise, it's great for them. Not so great if you're flying, and their sales guys are good. They'll tell you exactly, like I'm friends with a couple of sales guys at AirShare, and I had a subscriber that I connected with them. His trip was under 2 hours, and he was usually going out one day and then back another day. And they said straight up, look, we're not going to be the most cost effective use for you. But if you're trying to go out and back, so, today, let's say I was coming here to record the podcast, leave in Chattanooga, leave there. I don't know. We're going to record this in the afternoon. I'll leave there after breakfast sometime before lunch, arrive here, do the podcast, get back home. I'm out and back same day, 2 hours each way, 4 hours total on my one day of flying.
Yeah.
Because their hourly is lower. Whereas, so it's like, there's a little bit of like kind of like product and your demand fit to kind of match those two things together.
Yep. Is there a certain amount of hours a pilot can fly in a day?
So on part 135, it's what's the duty day? I think it's 14.
Okay. 14 total from the time you take off, from the time the wheels are
From
up.
the time he hits working to the time he has to be off.
But what is hit working? What's the definition
Like
of that?
clock in.
I know,
So,
but like you can clock in and not fly for 7 hours later.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Okay, so on
if
these
you're
fractional,
if you're working, like
Yeah.
call it work. So like duty day would be like, if you think about like an hourly employee, when do you say, I need you there at this time?
yeah,
And then you're going to work through, okay, so like, hey, we're leaving at 10 in the morning. Your pilot's probably getting there around 8:30 or 9, depending on what you'd have the ground guys bring the airplane out, but the pilot's can do a walk around. He shows up at 8:30. He's on the clock at 8:30. He's got 14 hours.
Okay.
And so at the end of those 14 hours, like, you're stuck. And let me just make sure that it's 14. 14. I was right.
You're right.
Good for me. And flight times within the duty day are restricted to a maximum of 8 hours for flight crews with one pilot and 10 hours for flight crews with two pilots. So it's a total of 14 hours. Two pilots can only fly 10. One pilot can only fly 8. So flight time is restricted, but also being on duty is restricted as well. And on part 135, it's a brick wall. It is 13 hours and 59 minutes. Minute clicks over, done. You can nothing. Like, got to be on the ground. And if you get busted, it's very expensive.
How do they determine when you can start again? You have to wait 10 hours or something?
Yeah, I believe it's a 10-hour rest period. But it's like, so 13 rest periods of 24 consecutive hours in each quarter, 12 hours, less than 48 hours. Like I don't know if you've ever if you know how like railroaders work, it's like, if you fly for this long, then you have to be on rest for this long. But if you work overtime, so if you cross over the 12-hour, but you really don't want your pilots being sleepy.
Yeah.
So it's 10 consecutive hours, but be nice.
Partnerships. I've actually never heard of this.
Yeah.
How do those work?
So Chris, you and I are both business people, and we both live here in Fort Worth, and we want to.
Okay, I have heard of these.
I'm going to fly 100 hours a year. You're going to fly 100 hours a year. Why don't we just go 50-50 on this thing?
Got it.
Partnership.
Cool.
So in a dry lease situation, one person owns the airplane and the other person rents it. In a partnership situation, we both are 50-50 owners. And you can structure this. It depends on like your corporate structure. And there's a couple guys out there. There's a couple companies out there that will help you do tax structure on this, where you may both own the LLC. So it may be a single LLC that owns the airplane, and then you're both 50-50 owners. Or there may be two LLCs that own the airplane and one's in the lead. So the FAA has to have a lead registered. So I've got a client that it's 3 guys, one 50% owner, one 25% owner, one 25% owner. So at purchase time, they all contributed 50% of the purchase price, 25 and 25. And then on the monthly fixed costs, so all those fixed costs that we were talking about, they split it. The one guy gets 50% of the bill, the other guy gets 25%, the other guy gets 25%. And then when they fly it, they all fly just at the straight variable cost.
Okay.
So that's a partnership.
Okay. Now I think we're going to bring it home on this topic, which I think is maybe, I'm not going to say the most fun, but maybe a little more fun. We'll see. It's time to buy one.
Okay.
Before we get into the actual planes, a couple questions. How do you, first off, like, how do you even buy a plane? Let's just start there. Like,
Yeah.
do you hire brokers? How do you test planes out? It's not like you go to a car dealership, drive 10 cars and pick one. What I found is it seems like there's tons of brands out there that all have a similar type plane. It's like, okay, is it just?
Well, I mean, it's like, am I going to drive a Yukon or a Suburban or a Cadillac or Expedition? Like, they all kind of. So you've got a couple major categories of airplanes.
Okay.
So the very smallest is the very light jet.
Okay.
Then you have the light jet, and then you have. Some people try and say there's a super light jet. They're all light jet is its own category. Then you have midsize, super midsize. Then you have heavies, ultra long range. So those are kind of your general categories. So ultra long range is your Global 7500, Gulfstream G700, soon to be the Falcon 10X. There's really only 3 players up there and that's like
$75 million.
Yeah, $75 million and up. Then you got like, okay, you can get a 737 in an executive cabin.
But you have to be like a Saudi prince.
Yeah, right. I think the only people that actually, you're either Donald Trump or a Saudi prince. It's like the only people who own 747s. So you've got the ultra long range, and that's ultra long range is, call it Fortune 50, Fortune 25, might have 2 or 3. And then oil is big for oil and gas because you want long legs, right? So Houston to Saudi Arabia, right? You're a top dog at BP. That's a pretty common leg. So, and then you've got celebrities, right? Kim Kardashian with a G650 or Jeff Bezos with 2 Gulfstream G650s.
Really?
Yeah, he's got 2 just in case one goes down.
And don't the big corporates, well, they'll fly 2 or 3 because they don't want their executives all sitting on one. So spread them out.
So I know of somebody who runs a corporate flight department for a Fortune 50 insurance company. And if you're a chief executive or if you're a chief officer, you cannot fly on the same plane. It's company policy. And you have to fly 5 years and newer, and you can only fly certain brands. You can't fly, like they have like rules where it's like you can only fly Gulfstream and you have to fly 550 and up. So like if they have a flight department and need supplemental lift because they have an airplane down, there's a finite buyer pool, and then it has to have operations. There's like, when you kind of get up into that upper echelon, like the rules get really, really rigid. We exist, and 99% of people who fly private exist in a totally different world where it's like,
okay, keep going down the list.
All right, so you've got heavies, or so you have ultra long range, then you have heavy jets. Heavy jets are going to be like the G450. It's not ultra long range, but you can jump the pond. The Global 6000, kind of that, like they're large cabin, but they don't have the really, really long legs like the ultra long range, right? So they're cousins. A lot of times they have the same fuselage. It's just they can't go as far. They have maybe different engine technology. So then you have super mids. Super mids are like, kind of call it they're the workhorse. They're coast to coast easily. Seat somewhere between 8 and 12, kind of depending on configuration. They're not going to be super wide, but they're also not going to be narrow. Stand up cabins most times, or almost. Like, I'm not 6 foot, so I can stand up in them, but Nick Huber, who's a giant, could not, right? So that's your super mids, and super mids and midsize, again, in the same way that heavies and ultra long range oftentimes share fuselages, or they're like real close to each other. Midsize is kind of, the Citation XLS is a midsize. They can usually, coast to coast is like they can get like Atlanta to like San Francisco, but they couldn't do like New York to San Francisco. It's like just barely out of range. And so so mid-size, real popular in the middle of the country. Mid-size and down, real popular Texas, Midwest, because it's easy to get to both coasts. They're oftentimes not needing to go coast to coast.
Yep.
So it's mid-size. You got light jets. Light jets are Phenom 300, PC-24. Trying to think of others in the like. Lear has a couple in kind of that straddles the mid-size to light jets. They're going to be cost-effective to fly. Citation CJ4, CJ3 plus, both light jets. Cost-effective, oftentimes single pilot, but not always. But a lot of times they are certified to fly with one pilot as opposed to two. Mid-size and up, two pilots, no questions. And then you got very light jets, which are kind of like the really tiny ones. So Vision Jet, Honda Jet, Phenom 100, and then the Citation M2 or the Citation Mustang. So that's your very light jets.
And then there's like prop.
And then you got turboprops.
Yeah.
So multi-engine turboprop, King Air, Piaggio, ugliest airplane. It's a very polarizing airplane. I think they're ugly, but their performance is great. So multi-engine turboprop, single-engine turboprop that's going to be PC-12 is going to be the largest. And then you've got TBM, Piper M600, M700, and then the TBM 960, 910, 860, 700. There's, a bunch of lines inside that. But those are going to be like, call it sports car turboprops. Single prop, 4 in the back, 2 in the front, real tight, zippy, speedy, retractable gear. There's also the Caravan, which is like super utilitarian.
Yep.
But those are all single engine turboprops. And then you get multi-engine piston and then single engine piston. And then you get the guy with the leaf blower on his backpack with the parachute up top.
So assuming that you are, just don't have assuming where you are in the country can dictate what you're going to buy. So if you're in the center of the country, you probably have more options of what to buy.
Yep.
If you're on the coasts and obviously you have the budget and you don't want to have to stop and fuel, there's only a certain amount of planes that you can buy.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. You really got to go super mid in the current lineup, how everything sits. You got to go super mid or up.
Okay. Okay. So I say I want to buy a plane.
Yeah.
What would be the process I go through to buy a plane?
So what I tell people is when you're thinking about buying a plane, buy the airplane that fits 80% of your mission. So let's say we're going from Fort Worth. Let's do an experiment. Let's buy Chris Powers a plane. I'm not saying that this is not investment advice.
No, I love this game. Hopefully it'll come true one day.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's buy you a plane. You want to sit down with a broker that is it is done through brokerages. You can do it through your chief pilot, but I have seen some very poor business decisions because pilots are exactly that. They are checklist guys. They really care about the airplane, but they're not necessarily thinking through kind of all the different ramifications. So I always suggest people work with a broker. I've seen brokers save people millions of dollars in transactions and collect small brokerage fees. So it's an outsized return for using a really good broker. Okay. And the other thing is disclaimer there, anybody can be a broker. So there's a lot of crappy brokers. Okay. It's like real estate agents or but it's way more complex. You may buy, if you're a mover and shaker, you may buy 20 airplanes in a year. These guys are helping people buy 30 or 20 airplanes in your lifetime. These guys are helping people buy 20 and 30 airplanes a year. So it's like they know the market. They know what models not to touch. They know what transacted when, all of that kind of stuff. So engage a broker. But I say buy an airplane that fits 80% of your mission. So we're going to buy Chris an airplane. So Chris, what's your furthest property that Fort Capital owns right now? What's the furthest property that you've got to reach to?
Orlando.
Okay. So Orlando, you can get there in a light jet or up, right? Your family vacations or your other executive, like your family vacations, you're the principal, right? Do you guys like to ski? Do you go up to New York? Like, do you go to Canada? What's your like favorite vacation destination or stuff like that?
Florida or Colorado?
Colorado. So all of those, we're still within the light jet region, right? So we're going to start in the light jet, but you also may have preferences, right? So I tell people, if you're just getting into it, save yourself some money and charter a couple of different types of airplanes to see what you're most comfortable with. Because you may say, I don't care if we're in a PC-12. I love the PC-12. My wife looks at a PC-12 and freaks out. She's like, there's only one engine. I'm like, well, it's a PT-6. It's fine. We've got a big glide range. She's like, no, it's got one engine. That freaks me out.
Yeah.
You're not going to, if you come home and say, honey, we just bought a PC-12, guess what? You're stuck.
Yeah.
Right. So charter first, right? So charter a couple of times for your mission or whatever. So, but let's say I would say a light jet totally fits that category. You're going to make it to Orlando. I don't know. We're going to look in like the CJ3 or CJ3, CJ4 market. How many kids you got?
3.
So you got 3 kids. So you need 5 seats. If you're going to go visit the property in Orlando, how many team members are you bringing?
Most
in the most case scenario,
6 or 7.
6 or 7. So 6 or 7 at most. Can you fit 6 or 7? Yes. Are you most likely 4, 2, 1? That's most people are flying 2 people. I mean, I know guys that own Global 7500s and it's like normally 2 people, right? They've got a shower in the back and like a full size in like a queen size bed.
Yeah.
And it's 2 guys, right? So light jet. We're looking at a light jet and we're going to leave from, all right, I'm going to assume your nearest airport, but what's the nearest airport to you?
Probably Meacham, Texas Jet.
Okay. We're going to go to Meacham. All right. So the CJ4 is going to get you as far north as Maine, as far west as Oregon and Washington, Florida, Cuba, Puerto Rico. You might have to stretch if you want to go into like the extreme Eastern Caribbean. Like if you can't get to St. Lucia,
okay,
but you get Dominican Republic. You get all of Mexico, all of Central America, and you're going to seat on the CJ4. You're going to seat 7 at most. If you wanted to max it out, you're going to seat 7, but 6 very comfortably. And you're going to fly it for $2,300 an hour.
Okay.
So that might be an interesting.
And my fixed costs are going to be what?
And your fixed costs on that are going to be $600,000 a year. That's including captain, co-pilot, insurance, training, miscellaneous reserves, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're flying, let's say you're going to fly 400 hours a year because you're aggressively acquiring in Orlando, right? You've got one, you set your pin and you said, all right, we love Orlando, Baltimore bridge crash. So we feel like we're real bullish on Florida ports. So we're actively acquiring in Florida. So you're going to be flying the plane a lot. You're going to fly 400 hours this year, right? So you're going to Florida, you're seeing your other properties in Texas. You're maybe coming up to Chattanooga to maybe take a look at the new enterprise park that they're building up there. So you're going to fly 400 hours a year. It's going to cost you around $1.5 million to operate that airplane for the year that you own it.
Okay.
Before you buy it.
So what you're telling me though is I've gone through that process. Maybe I've hired a broker and said, I want a light jet.
Yep.
And then as far as determining which light jet I want, it's kind of like, do I want a Chevy? Do I want a GMC or do I want an Escalade?
Yeah. And one of the things that you want to look at is you want to look at there's some nuanced things to look at. Here's the reality. Mark to market is near impossible in private aviation. You're not going to find an exact comparable if you're going to buy an airplane.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So you're not going to have 2 2022 CJ4s that both have 3,128 hours transact in the same year.
Okay.
So like you've got market factors that are going on. You want to buy something that has good maintenance support. You want to think through, if you're buying a Pilatus, right? Cutter is over in Dallas. So like you've got maintenance support down the street. Worst case, if you need a part, Cutter can run somebody in the truck and come over here and fix your PC-24, right? So Pilatus may make sense for you here in this region. Or, maybe you're thinking through like just overall network support based off of where you're going, right? So if you're going into Orlando all the time, you may want to think about the Citation because there's a CJ4 facility in Orlando. Or there's a Citation facility, there's a Cessna Citation facility in Orlando. Maybe that's what makes sense. You want to think through those things. At the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're buying into a model family company's still around. They're still producing parts. You can still get maintenance support. You're not buying something that might be experiencing rapid market depreciation, or maybe you're trying to make a deal and catch the bottom. I don't know. Depends on your risk tolerance, but a lot of it's preference.
How far back should you go in age? Is that just it's assuming it's been in a plan and and it's been kind of maintained. Is that just too nuanced of a question, or is it like don't buy anything older than 10 years?
Yeah. So you got hours. You've got a couple breakpoints. You've got age, and then you've got hours.
Yeah.
Hours and landings is associated with it too. Like you don't want something that only flew 30-minute flights, because every time that gear hits the ground, there's a little bit of pressure that gets put on.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, you've got some breakpoints. You've got 10 years.
Okay.
10 years is a breakpoint. Bank of America won't touch anything older than 10 years, for instance.
Okay.
You're gonna the depreciation similar to in a similar way to a car. You eat a lot of the depreciation the first 10 years. After that, it starts to flatten out. After 20 years, you've got kind of another breaking point where, and this is kind of in the financial markets, is a lot of banks will say 10 years are cut off. Other banks will say 20 years are cut off. 25 is some others. But I don't know. I know a guy who's about to buy a early 1990s Astra that doesn't have a lot of hours on it, and it's got decent support and it's cheap. He's buying it for like $1 million. Cheap, relatively speaking, right? Compared to a brand new Citation M2 for 6.5, right? Yeah. So it's like, I think I would stay away from anything older than 1990 per se. I mean, that's when you're starting to get it's getting
34 years old.
Yeah, it's pretty old. Were you born in 90?
I was born in 87.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I was like,
when are you born?
93.
Okay. So you're a young
guy. But I'm bald. You've got better hair than I do.
I've got gray hair. And I'm assuming it just there's Carfax or something for airplanes, so you kind of know where these things stand. Or would you say don't buy a plane that you don't know how it's been maintained, or just get an inspection or something? Yeah, you would think that there was a Carfax because it's a multi-million-dollar asset. The reality is there's a whole lot of stuff that's regulated. There's a whole lot of stuff that just kind of you have no idea. So you've got logbooks, right? So everything that gets done, every screw that gets changed, every wrench that turns on that airplane has a maintenance event written into it. Okay.
And there are softwares that you can scan them and basically say go find me the problems. A good broker will have a logbook review team that will be like, hey, by the way, stuff to look out for. And you may get really, really nitpicky on the inspection, but you'll do a pre-buy inspection before you buy it. So you'll have a licensed mechanic out that does pre-buy inspections, that looks over the entire airplane and make sure that there's nothing blaring, right? Or nothing that's, terrible going to happen. But there are stuff that slips through. It's just the reality of it.
Okay. Smart friend off of Twitter, direct question. What is the right way to think about the best value of a plane by its age? In other words, is there any rule of thumb for the sweet spot where the plane is already depreciated meaningfully, but it is still very reliable and needs relatively little maintenance?
I would say 10 to 25 years. That's your 10 years old to 25 years old is your sweet spot. You've depreciated the asset itself's eaten most of the depreciation in the first 10 years, but 25-year-old airplanes are still workhorses. I mean, in today's market, it's a 99. 99's still, going to be cranking.
Okay.
So I would say if I was going to say, if that's what you're trying to frame, between 10 and 25, or 10 and 20, if you're, want to say, I want a 20 on the front of the age of the airplane.
And I'm assuming most people, this is an industry where most planes are purchased or used. In the car market, a lot more used cars. There's car dealerships, things like that. But the majority of plane sales are happening in the used market. You're not buying something right off the factory floor.
Yeah, you've only got, the amount of new planes that get delivered is 400
a year.
Yeah.
Across all brands?
I pull up the exact report and tell you.
Okay, while you're looking at that, okay, I've found my plane. Are most people paying cash for this stuff, or are most people financing them?
Yeah, so it's funny. In the aviation business, or in the aviation finance business, my number one competitor is the balance sheet. It's actually not other financiers. I'm very rarely in competition with another aviation finance person.
Okay.
It's I'm sitting down with the CFO if I get brought to the table and they're going, well, I may pay cash and I may finance it. The reality is on a lot of these airplanes is that you've got relatively liquid folks that are buying airplanes and they're saying, look, I'm just going to pay cash because it's a depreciating asset. While that is true and it is a depreciating asset and it's tough to finance depreciating assets, the reality is that if you want to secure it, if you want to secure your credit against an asset, I advise people, look, if you're going to pay cash, you should consider putting 50% LTV because at 50% loan to value, you're going to get some pretty aggressive rates. Like in today's market, depending on how old it is, mid sixes, which unsecured debts in the nines.
Is it floating or fixed?
Depends. It really depends on what you're trying to optimize for. A lot of times we'll sit down with the client. There's a myriad of options in the market. Today's market, most every client's taking a floating rate because they're saying, look, we're going to go ahead and bet that it's going to go down. And if it goes up 50 basis points, we'll go ahead and lock it in and be safe. Prepay penalties are today's market pretty standard, anywhere from a 3-2-1 prepay on a 5-year term. So 3% first year, 2%, 1%, or 1% the first year. It kind of depends. And the banks will have a conversation with you. Like they'll work with you, especially if you kind of if you got good credit and you've got a good asset, something that's call it 20 years or less, and you're not levered to the teeth.
Yeah.
Like banks will work with you and you can get pretty aggressive. I mean, lowest I've seen is like 5-year treasury plus like 120 basis points. Like that's aggressive,
and is the term usually 5 years, 7 years?
5 years is really standard, especially right now. Because there's so many banks that have just funny balance sheets. And so everybody's saying 5 years. 7, you can squeak out a 7-year term. Realistically, the average life of an aircraft ownership is like 3 to 4 years. It's a trade up market. So you're flying your Phenom or you're flying your CJ4, right? We put you in a CJ4 and you go to an event and you look out the window and you see someone with a Sovereign and you're like, it's pretty sweet. I think I might call my CFO and see if I could get me a Sovereign, right? There's a ramp thing and it can be a little bit fleeting. You can really have a hard time kind of keeping up with the Joneses, but there is 5-year term. By the time you get to 5 years, probably refi it if you're going to keep it, and refi it lower interest rate.
So what would you guess is the percentage of people that buy for the flex versus buy for the actual need or what they actually need?
I think it totally depends on which part of the market that you're in.
Yeah.
Right. So
if you're getting up,
you're starting to get flexy.
You're flexing.
But the majority of business aircraft flights that don't happen in Gulfstream G650s. They happen in Citation jets. They happen in XLS because it's a utility tool. And so, yes, you can say my jet, but it's a utility at the end of the day. And you're looking to use that asset to produce more, outsized outcomes, right? You're Little Debbie's a great example. Okay. Little Debbie's in Collegedale, Tennessee, which is outside of Chattanooga. They've got another plant in Kansas.
Oh, we're actually talking about the Little Debbie cakes.
The Little Debbie. Little Debbie.
I thought you were making up a character.
No, Little Debbie
Little Debbie cake.
As in like,
they probably have a
Gulfstream
or something. I mean,
they actually have, this is crazy. They have a scheduled airline service that goes between their factories every day. It's a regional jet that they've outfitted like JSX, and they just run it every day for employees to move back and forth.
Wow.
Because your commercial alternative is awful. You live in DFW. DFW is in a unique situation. It's Atlanta, LAX, DFW, New York. You got airline service everywhere. I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I've got Atlanta, Dallas, and Chicago. That's about it. And we got 3 flights a day. If I wanted to go anywhere else, I've got to connect through one of those cities, and it's a whole day travel, right? And when you start thinking about the value of your time as a principal or the value of your team's time, the equation is not, oh, I'm super rich and I'm flying my private jet. It's more of, this is a business tool that's allowing us to increase just-in-time capacity. Or you talk about getting to your next deal. You're in Orlando. We're not in a competitive market today, but let's say we are in a competitive market. The difference between you being in person today and you being in person tomorrow might mean that your competitor's there today, having shaken hands, eating lunch.
Interesting.
Sellers starting to, get to know them because you got stuck by American Airlines saying, "Oh, we're not flying today."
Okay. And if I'm buying it for business from a tax implication standpoint, assuming I fly the plane more than 51% a year for business, I can write the entire thing off in year one.
So this is not tax advice, and you should not view this as tax advice. Please call your tax professional.
Yeah.
That's the disclaimer that I'm sure my attorney would like me to say.
Okay.
Now let me tell you what all of our clients do.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Write the whole thing off. And you can bonus depreciate it if you have a liquidity event.
Yep.
So it's great for, you have some sort of capital event and you need depreciation. In 100% bonus depreciation, the back of the napkin math says your 20% down is now that, if you're going to get 80% LTV on the airplane, your 20% down is taken off of your, taxable income. It's if you just do really rough numbers. So you can write off, 60%. What we're seeing is a lot more people just taking straight line. There's a schedule that the MBAA puts out that basically allows you to, it's like 20% the first year, 40% the second year, and then it kind of trails off from there. But yeah, you can depreciate that. And then not only do you depreciate the purchase, but then all of the hourly cost. What a lot of our clients will do is they'll open an airplane LLC. And so the airplane gets bought by the airplane LLC. The airplane LLC is a wholly owned subsidiary of operating company X. Operating company X then leases the airplane from airplane LLC, but because of the ownership part, they get to depreciate it.
Yep. Okay.
So if you're a senator and you're listening, we would love 100% bonus depreciation to come back. And please don't exclude private aviation like was said in a bulletin that came out a couple weeks ago.
Okay. So I now know how to finance it. I now know what I'm buying. I've learned how to buy it. But all that to be said, how should I know it's time to buy? All things being equal, I can afford it. Chartering sounds pretty good. Maybe fractional. How do I get to a spot where it's okay, the smartest thing should be to buy a plane?
Yeah. If you have a depreciation need in your business, that's kind of for our clients, number one. You say, look, maybe you're in an asset position where you've run out of stuff to depreciate. You called Mitchell Baldridge and he's cost segged everything. Mitchell. And, maybe you're I need depreciation. I could charter, and that's just all going to be operating expense, but you kind of need a little bit additional. That's where owning makes sense. And then the other piece is frankly, if you want to fly the plane right now, you should own it. If you fly on NetJets, you can't fly. We're not flying till tomorrow.
But it's not about hours. If I'm flying 300 hours a year, you should definitely start owning a plane.
Yeah, your break point is about 300 hours if you look at your blended hourly cost. So
except for your buddy that owns a Global 737-500 that flies at 60 hours a year.
Right, exactly. Yeah, those guys are I don't know what graphs they're looking at, but
not the one you're looking at.
It ain't the one I'm looking at. But yeah, it's, comparatively, I mean, I ran analysis and it is all super model dependent. It's also market dependent, right? I think we're coming into a situation where the charter market's cooling off. So those numbers could get a little bit different, but it's somewhere between 200 and 300 hours a year, kind of depending on what model that you choose, that it, from a cash standpoint. But the other thing is that you have to think about, if you own the airplane, is it flies empty a lot if you're going to keep it at your house or at your home airport, right? So
what does it if you're in a market You're saying it flies empty a lot because the pilots have to get back home if they're
Right.
going to, but wouldn't you just fly them commercially home and park the plane?
It depends on, there's a lot of factors to that. I mean, a lot of it's, quality of life. I mean, your pilot is going to become, oftentimes your pilot's going to know more than your CFO does, because they're literally they're there for a lot of moments, especially, you have somebody for a few years and it's like they kind of become both employee and kind of part of the family. And so if you want your pilots to have a better quality of life, and you're tired of, and you're going to Teterboro and you're tired of paying $1,500 a day to park it, you may just fly it back home to sit at home while you're wherever you are for a week. It just totally, it depends on what your mission profile is, which is, again, going back to like, engage somebody early in the process. If you need a recommendation, I'm happy to give you a couple of recommendations on the good guys, right? But it's like, they'll sit down with you and go, unless you just really want to own it, like, probably doesn't make sense to own it yet.
Yep.
Right. If you're, but I mean, I've got a subscriber that lives so the origin destination is a very remote, not very remote, but a remote area of Colorado. And the commercial airliner service, every time their pilots to be on a 12-hour day back, well, they're having to pay duty days. They're having to pay, there's like all of these like kind of soft skill part, right? Like having, taking care of your employees and not making them fly you 10 hours and then get on a 12-hour flight home, or get them a hotel. Now they're away from their family for 3 days, as opposed to they could be home that night. It's like, and ramp fees. So
what's a ramp fee?
So ramp fee, when you land, you got to pay.
Oh,
it's like, you just stuck. And then overnight, like detention fees or hangar fees or whatever, wherever your destination is. So, I mean, I know of a principal out of North Carolina. He really likes to sleep in his bed. And so his pilots have probably the best gig in any Part 91 operator. They said, we haven't slept in a hotel in 3 years. He flies like 400 hours a year. He does a speaking conference in Colorado, a speaking gig in Colorado. He likes to sleep in his own bed. So they come home. He needs to go back the next day. He goes back.
Oh, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. Like sleeps. He likes to sleep in his own bed.
Oh, I didn't know where you were going with that. So he'll go do the thing, and rather than go back to a hotel, fly home and then come back in the next morning.
Yeah. If he's got to be there for 2 days, or he'll just be like, I'm going home. See ya. But that
means if you're flying a dead leg, that basically means you're always flying 2 dead legs.
Yeah.
Because you take me to Colorado, then you fly it back. Then a week later you fly to come back to get me. So for every flight, there's 2 dead legs, basically.
Exactly. And that's where, like,
do you know the percentage of dead legs flown to normal, like with people in seats?
It depends on if you own it, somewhere between 25 and 45%. It's like totally depends. So like the 25% mark ish, 300 hours a year is your break point. So if you're flying 25% empty or so, it's about 300 hours. If you're flying 50% empty, it's never going to be cheaper to own. Like, you cannot, if you fly every time, you're going to fly out, it's going to drop you off, and they're going to fly back and come back and get you and fly back. You're doubling the cost of every hour flown, every occupied hour flown.
All right. I think that pretty much covers it. This has been awesome. I actually sent Johnny a link to your newsletter that anybody here could listen to that goes way more in depth on price points and things that we talked about today.
And even better, for subscribers only, if you subscribe to my newsletter, I have free 15-minute calls. I'm not to charging yet. We've got a friend on Twitter that charges
hurry, get
$200. So I'm not charging yet. It's free. But if my calendar gets too full, but I do free 15-minute calls. And I mean, I've done calls from, hey, I've never flown charter before. How much should this cost?
Yep.
To, hey, I own 4 midsize and I'm thinking about what does a heavy look like for me? Like or, hey, I'm a wheels up flyer. I'm thinking about moving to NetJets or whatever, right? It's 15 minutes and the advice is worth about what you pay for it, free, right? So, hopefully it's a little bit more informed than, some guy off the street or on TikTok. So instead of watching all the TikToks and Instagram reels and that, give me a call. We'll talk for 15 minutes. I'm happy to give advice or give my opinion on stuff.
You're the man. Thanks, Preston.
Awesome. Thanks, dude.